The morning briefing room fell silent as Sergeant Major Williams slammed his clipboard against the podium, the sharp crack reverberating off concrete walls like a gunshot. His weathered face twisted into a sneer as he scanned the assembled trainees, his gaze finally settling on the small figure in the back row. "Johnson," he barked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Emma Johnson, 24 years old, 5'3", barely meets the minimum physical requirements." The other recruits shifted uncomfortably as his voice rose. "Tell me, recruit, what makes you think you can handle a rifle that weighs almost as much as you do? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Emma sat perfectly still, her brown eyes fixed on a point just above the sergeant major's head. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, fingers steady despite the tremor she felt deep in her chest. Around her, 30 other trainees watched the spectacle unfold, some with poorly concealed smirks, others with sympathetic glances that somehow felt worse than the mockery. "This isn't summer camp, sweetheart," Williams continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "This is sniper school. We make killers here, not participants in some feel-good inclusion program." He picked up her file, waving it like evidence of a crime. "Farm girl from Nebraska. Previous experience? Hunting rabbits with daddies. 22. The room erupted in scattered laughter. Real impressive credentials for someone who wants to take 1,000-meter shots at enemy combatants. Emma's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She thought of the mornings before dawn, the patient hours spent motionless in deer blinds, the countless shots that had put food on her family's table when money was tight. But she said nothing. Speaking would only give Williams more ammunition, and she had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the strongest response. The sergeant major took a step closer, his boots clicking against the polished floor. "You know what I see when I look at you, Johnson? I see someone who's going to wash out in the first week, someone who's taking up a spot that should go to a real soldier." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every ear in the room. "Someone who's going to get good men killed because she wanted to prove a point." The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Emma felt the familiar burn of injustice in her throat, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times growing up as the only girl who wanted to hunt with her father instead of help her mother in the kitchen. But she swallowed it down, just as she always had, and kept her expression neutral. Williams wasn't finished. He opened Emma's file wider, his eyes scanning the pages with theatrical disgust. "Says here you scored expert on the rifle range during basic training." His tone suggested this was somehow suspicious rather than impressive. Funny thing about basic training ranges, though. Paper targets don't shoot back. They don't move. They don't hide behind cover or try to kill you first. He closed the file with a snap. "Real sniping isn't about hitting a bullseye at 200 meters, little girl. It's about making impossible shots under impossible conditions while someone's trying to put a bullet in your brain." The recruit sitting next to Emma, a broad-shouldered man named Rodriguez, shifted slightly in his seat. She could feel his discomfort radiating like heat, but he didn't speak up. None of them would. That was the unwritten rule of military training. You didn't challenge the instructor, especially not to defend someone else. Williams began pacing now, his heavy frame casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. "Let me paint you a picture of what we do here," he said, his voice taking on the cadence of a sermon. 2 weeks from now, those of you who make it that far will be lying in the mud at dawn, trying to spot an enemy sniper who's been hunting coalition forces for 6 months. The temperature will be 42 degrees, raining, and you'll have been in position for 18 hours without food or water. His eyes found Emma again. "Think your daddy's hunting trips prepared you for that?" Emma remembered the winter morning when she was 16, lying in a snowdrift for 4 hours waiting for the perfect shot on a buck that would feed her family for 2 months. The temperature had been well below freezing, and she'd been so cold, she couldn't feel her fingers when she finally squeezed the trigger. But she had made the shot, clean and precise, just as her grandfather had taught her. She remembered the pride in her father's eyes, the way he'd finally stopped talking about wishing he'd had a son to carry on the hunting tradition. But Williams wasn't interested in her memories. He was building toward something. She could sense it in the way his voice was rising, in the theatrical manner of his gestures. This wasn't just routine hazing of a new recruit. This felt personal, though she couldn't understand why. The human head, Williams continued, measures approximately 10 inches from forehead to chin. At 1,000 meters, that target appears smaller than a dime, held at arm's length. Factor in wind, humidity, temperature variations, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, and you're looking at a shot that maybe 1 in 1,000 soldiers can make consistently. He stopped directly in front of Emma's chair, but I'm supposed to believe that a farm girl who probably learned to shoot by plinking cans off fence posts is going to master those variables in 12 weeks. The question hung in the air, clearly rhetorical. Emma understood that any response would be seen as insubordination. She kept her mouth shut and her eyes forward, even as she felt the heat of William's stare boring into her. "You want to know what really bothers me about recruits like you, Johnson?" His voice had dropped again, taking on an almost conversational tone that was somehow more threatening than his earlier shouting. "It's not that you're small or female or from some nowhere farming town. It's that you don't understand what you're asking for." He turned to address the entire room, but his words were clearly meant for her. A sniper isn't just a good shot with a fancy rifle. A sniper is a weapon system, mind, body, and equipment working in perfect harmony to deliver death from distances where the target never even knows they're being hunted. His voice grew harder. A sniper spends days stalking a single target, moving inches at a time, eating nothing, drinking nothing, lying in their own waste because moving to relieve themselves might compromise the mission. Emma had read the manuals, studied the requirements, understood intellectually what she was signing up for, but hearing it laid out so starkly, in front of 30 other recruits who were already looking at her like she didn't belong, made the challenge seem almost insurmountable. "A sniper," Williams continued, "watches through their scope as enemy soldiers laugh and joke and share photographs of their families. Then, when the moment is right, they put a bullet through one of those soldiers' heads from so far away that the sound of the shot doesn't reach the others for several seconds." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "Can you do that, Johnson? Can you take a life from a distance so great that it feels almost godlike?" The question wasn't really about killing, Emma realized. It was about whether she had the mental fortitude to do what snipers did, to be both patient hunter and precise executioner, to carry the psychological weight of kills made from positions of complete dominance. It was a fair question, actually, and one she'd asked herself many times during the application process. "Because if you can't," Williams said, his voice rising again, "if you wash out after 2 weeks because the training is too hard, or the physical requirements are too demanding, or because you finally realize this isn't the place for social experiments, then you've wasted everyone's time. You've taken a slot that could have gone to someone who might actually contribute to the mission." Emma thought about the night she'd decided to apply for sniper school. She'd been deployed to Afghanistan as a regular infantry soldier, pulling guard duty and running routine patrols. During a firefight outside Kandahar, she'd watched a Taliban sniper pin down her entire squad from a rooftop 800 meters away. The enemy shooter had been good, precise, placing shots exactly where they needed to be to keep her unit from advancing or retreating. It had taken an airstrike to finally neutralize the threat, and even then, Emma had found herself grudgingly impressed by the skill and patience the enemy sniper had displayed. That night, lying in her bunk while mortars exploded in the distance, she'd realized she wanted to be that good. Not for the killing, but for the mastery it represented. The perfect fusion of skill, patience, and precision that could turn a single soldier into a force multiplier, capable of changing the outcome of entire battles. Williams was wrapping up his introduction now, his voice returning to the official tone of a military instructor. "This course has a 70% failure rate," he announced. "Most of you will not graduate. Most of you will discover that you don't have what it takes to be a precision marksman in the United States Army." His eyes found Emma one last time. "Some of you will discover that sooner than others." The dismissal came with the usual barked commands and scraping of chairs against linoleum. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the other recruits filed out of the briefing room, Emma remained seated for a moment, processing what had just happened. She'd expected the training to be difficult, the standards to be high, the instructors to be demanding. She hadn't expected the personal animosity that had radiated from Williams like heat from a forge. Rodriguez paused beside her chair as the room emptied. "Don't let him get to you," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He does this to everyone, finds their weak spot and hammers on it." Emma looked up at him, noting the genuine concern in his dark eyes. "What makes you think I'm bothered?" she asked. Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Because you're human," he said, "and because he was trying to break you before the real training even starts." Emma stood slowly, gathering her materials with practiced efficiency. "Maybe he's right," she said, testing the words to see how they felt. "Maybe I don't belong here." Rodriguez shook his head. "I saw your scores from basic. Nobody shoots expert by accident. Whatever else Williams thinks about you, he can't argue with your marksmanship fundamentals." They walked together toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the now empty room. "The thing about Sergeant Major Williams," Rodriguez continued, "is that he's been doing this for 15 years. He's seen hundreds of recruits come through this program, and he's developed a pretty good sense of who's going to make it and who isn't." He paused at the door. "But sometimes he's wrong." Emma appreciated the encouragement, even if she suspected Rodriguez was just being kind. She'd heard similar reassurances throughout her military career, from drill sergeants who told her she'd never make it through basic training, from squad leaders who doubted her ability to handle combat deployments, from fellow soldiers who questioned whether women belonged in combat roles at all. The encouragement always came from well-meaning people who wanted to help, but it never quite erased the doubt that crept in during the quiet moments. Outside the briefing room, the Colorado morning air carried the sharp scent of pine trees and gun oil. Fort Carson stretched out below them, a sprawling military installation nestled against the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. In the distance, Emma could see other training ranges where soldiers practiced the deadly arts of modern warfare. Somewhere among those ranges was the sniper course she'd be attempting to conquer over the next 12 weeks. The barracks assigned to sniper school candidates was a 2-story brick building that had probably been constructed sometime in the 1970s. Emma's room was on the second floor, a sparse affair with 2 narrow beds, 2 wall lockers, and a single window that looked out over the parade ground. Her roommate was a tall, athletic woman named Patterson who'd transferred from the military police corps. "How was the welcome briefing?" Patterson asked as Emma entered the room. She was lying on her bed reading a technical manual on ballistics, her long legs crossed at the ankles. "About what I expected," Emma replied, hanging her uniform jacket in the locker with military precision. "Sergeant Major Williams seems like a real charmer." Patterson laughed, a sound that held more grimness than humor. "Williams has been running candidates through this course since before either of us joined the Army," she said. "The word is he's never had a female graduate." Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Never?" she asked. Patterson shook her head. "Couple have come close. One made it to week 10 before she was recycled for failing the final shooting test. Another lasted until week 8 before she quit during the field training exercise." Emma sat on her own bed, suddenly feeling the weight of what she'd undertaken. She'd known the statistics, of course. Female snipers were rare in any military organization, and the U.S. Army had only recently begun accepting women into sniper training at all. But hearing that no woman had ever successfully completed Williams' specific program was different than knowing the general statistics. "What happened to them?" she asked. "The ones who didn't make it?" Patterson closed her manual and sat up. "Different reasons," she said. "Some couldn't handle the physical requirements. Some struggled with the technical aspects of long-range shooting. Some just decided it wasn't worth the harassment." She paused, and some were probably set up to fail. Emma understood what Patterson was implying without needing it spelled out. Military training could be subjective in many ways. An instructor who was determined to fail a particular student could usually find ways to make it happen, especially in a course as demanding and technical as sniper school. "So why are you here?" Emma asked. "Why risk being the next failure?" Patterson smiled, and this time there was real warmth in the expression. "Same reason you are, I'm guessing," she said. "Because I know I'm good enough, and I'm tired of letting other people's expectations limit what I can accomplish." They talked for another hour about their backgrounds, their motivations, their hopes for the course. Patterson had been a competitive shooter in college before joining the Army, with several national-level medals in precision rifle competitions. Her path to sniper school had been more traditional than Emma's, built on formal training and documented achievements rather than intuitive skill developed in farm fields and hunting blinds. As evening approached, Emma found herself walking alone around the base perimeter, a habit she'd developed during previous training courses when she needed time to think. The Rocky Mountains loomed against the darkening sky, their peaks still touched with snow despite the advancing spring. Somewhere up in those mountains, she knew, were ranges where she'd be expected to make shots at distances that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. She thought about her grandfather, who taught her to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold his old hunting rifle. He'd been a Marine sniper during the Korean War, though he'd rarely talked about his service. What he had shared were the fundamentals of marksmanship, the patience required for hunting, the respect that should be shown for any weapon capable of taking life. Shooting, he'd told her once, isn't about the gun. It's about understanding yourself well enough to control every variable you can, and accepting the ones you can't. At the time, she'd been 12 years old, and more interested in the mechanical aspects of how bullets traveled from barrel to target. Now, facing the most challenging shooting course in the military, she was beginning to understand what he'd really been trying to teach her. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "First day done," it read. "How did it go?" Emma stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to decide how to answer. She could tell the truth about William's hostility, about the obvious skepticism from her fellow trainees, about the statistics Patterson had shared regarding female graduation rates. Or she could offer the reassuring non-answer that military families learn to give and receive. "Going well," she texted back. "Long days ahead, but I'm ready for them." It wasn't exactly a lie, she told herself. She was ready, in the sense that she'd prepared as much as possible and was committed to seeing the course through, regardless of the challenges. Whether that readiness would be sufficient remained to be seen. The next morning brought the first practical training session, held on a basic marksmanship range that would have been familiar to any Army recruit. Emma arrived early, as was her habit, and spent a few minutes examining the rifles that had been laid out for the students. They were standard M24 sniper weapon systems, bolt-action rifles chambered in 7.62 mm NATO with variable power telescopic sights. Williams appeared exactly at the appointed time, his uniform as crisp as his demeanor was harsh. "Today we establish baseline capabilities," he announced to the assembled students. "Everyone will fire a 10-round group at 300 meters. This isn't pass-fail, it's just to see what we're working with." His gaze swept the line of students before settling on Emma. "Some of you may discover that your self-assessment was overly optimistic." The shooting commenced with military efficiency. Each student allocated a specific time slot and a specific rifle. Emma watched as the others took their turns, noting their techniques and the results they achieved. Rodriguez proved to be a solid marksman, grouping his shots within a 4-inch circle. Patterson was even better, managing a 3-inch group that drew approving nods from the range safety officers. When Emma's turn came, she approached the firing line with deliberate calm. The rifle felt familiar in her hands, despite being a more sophisticated weapon than anything she'd used growing up. She adjusted the scope and bipod methodically, taking the time to ensure everything was properly configured, despite the impatience radiating from Williams behind her. Her first shot felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger. The recoil was sharp, but manageable, and through the scope she could see the bullet hole appear just left of the bullseye. She made a minor windage adjustment and fired again, this shot impacting slightly closer to center. By the 4th shot, she had found the rifle's preferences and was placing bullets exactly where she intended them to go. Williams said nothing as she completed her 10-round string, but she could feel his attention like a weight on her shoulders. When she finished and stepped back from the firing line, he walked downrange to examine her target personally, rather than relying on the spotting scope like he had with the other students. The target came back with 9 of 10 shots clustered within a 2-inch circle, with the 10th shot opening the group to just over 3 inches. It was the best performance of the day. Better than what either Rodriguez or Patterson had achieved. Better than what most of the male recruits had managed, despite their obvious physical advantages. Williams studied the target for a long moment before looking up at Emma. "Lucky shooting," he said finally. "Let's see if you can repeat it when the pressure's on." It wasn't praise, but it wasn't the dismissive criticism she'd expected either. Around her, the other students were looking at her target with expressions that ranged from impressed to resentful. That afternoon brought classroom instruction on the technical aspects of long-range shooting. Williams proved to be a knowledgeable instructor when he wasn't actively trying to intimidate specific students, walking them through the complex mathematics of ballistic calculations and environmental factors that affected bullet flight at extended ranges. Emma found herself genuinely engaged with the material, recognizing concepts she'd learned intuitively through years of hunting, but had never understood in formal terms. The way temperature affected powder burn rates, the manner in which humidity changed air density, the Coriolis effect that could push bullets several inches off target at extreme ranges. These were variables she'd compensated for unconsciously in the field, but having them explained scientifically gave her a framework for making more precise adjustments. During a break in the instruction, Rodriguez approached her with a question about wind-reading techniques. "That shooting this morning," he said quietly, "that wasn't luck." Emma shrugged. "Williams thinks it was," she replied. Rodriguez shook his head. "Williams says whatever he thinks will get in your head. But I was watching, and I saw how you worked through that rifle. You've done this before." Emma appreciated the observation, but she wasn't ready to discuss her background in detail. The other students were still evaluating her, still deciding whether she was a legitimate teammate or just someone taking up space in the course. Her shooting that morning had bought her some credibility, but she knew that credibility would evaporate quickly if she failed to maintain the standard. The first week continued with a mixture of classroom instruction and practical exercises designed to build fundamental skills. Emma threw herself into the training with complete focus, staying late to practice sight adjustments and spending her free time studying ballistic tables and weather reading techniques. She was determined to give Williams no legitimate reason to criticize her performance. Patterson proved to be an excellent training partner, sharing insights from her competitive shooting background while benefiting from Emma's intuitive understanding of environmental factors. They began working together during practice sessions, spotting for each other and discussing the subtle factors that affected shot placement at different ranges. "You shoot like someone who learned in the field rather than on formal ranges," Patterson observed during one evening practice session. "There's something different about the way you read conditions." Emma nodded. "Hunting requires you to make first-round hits," she said. "You don't get practice shots when there's a deer standing 200 yards away." As the week progressed, Emma began to notice that Williams' hostility toward her was shifting in subtle ways. He still called on her more frequently than the other students, still subjected her answers to more scrutiny than seemed warranted, but the personal attacks had diminished, replaced by a professional skepticism that felt less vindictive and more like legitimate instruction. The reason became clear during Friday's practical exercise, a shooting test at 400 meters that would determine which students advanced to the next phase of training. Emma shot another sub-2-inch group, confirming that her earlier performance hadn't been an accident. More importantly, she demonstrated the consistency that separated natural marksmen from students who might occasionally shoot well but couldn't repeat their performance under pressure. Williams approached her as she was cleaning her rifle after the exercise. "Johnson," he said, his voice carrying none of its earlier hostility, "you shoot better than I expected." It was perhaps the closest thing to praise she was likely to receive from him, and Emma accepted it with a simple nod. "Thank you, Sergeant Major," she replied. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This was the easy part. Everything gets harder from here." He paused, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The question isn't whether you can shoot. The question is whether you can do everything else a sniper needs to do while maintaining that level of marksmanship." Emma understood what he meant. The shooting was only one component of sniper training, and arguably not even the most difficult one. The weeks ahead would test her ability to move unseen across hostile terrain, to remain motionless for hours while maintaining perfect alertness, to make life and death decisions under pressure while operating alone or with minimal support. That evening, as she sat in her room cleaning her equipment and preparing for the challenges ahead, Emma reflected on how much her situation had changed in just 1 week. She'd gone from being the recruit Williams expected to wash out quickly to being one of the more promising students in the course. The transformation hadn't been dramatic or sudden, just a gradual recognition that her skills were legitimate and her commitment was genuine. But she also understood that this was still just the beginning. The baseline shooting tests and classroom instruction were designed to weed out students who clearly didn't belong in the course. The real challenges lay ahead, in the field training exercises and advanced shooting techniques that would test not just her marksmanship, but her ability to function as a complete sniper system. Patterson was already asleep when Emma finally turned off her reading light and settled into her narrow bunk. Outside her window, the Colorado mountains stood silhouetted against a star-filled sky, their peaks sharp and unforgiving in the moonlight. Somewhere among those mountains, she knew, were ranges where she'd soon be expected to make shots at distances that would have seemed impossible when she first learned to handle her grandfather's hunting rifle. As she drifted towards sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was of her grandfather's words about understanding yourself well enough to control every variable you could. The first week of sniper school had taught her that the variables were more complex than she'd imagined, but the fundamental principle remained the same. Success would depend on her ability to master herself first, then master the techniques and equipment that would make her effective as a precision marksman. The real test of that mastery was still to come. The alarm pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 0430 hours, yanking Emma from dreams of endless prairie horizons back to the stark reality of military barracks. Week 2 brought advanced fieldcraft training, and Williams had made it clear that this phase would separate the serious candidates from those merely plain soldier. Emma, dressed in darkness, her movements efficient and silent, as Patterson stirred in the adjacent bunk. Outside, the Colorado air carried a bite that spoke of winter's reluctance to release its grip on the mountains. 26 students remained from the original 30 who had started the course, 4 having already been eliminated for various deficiencies during the first week's evaluations. Emma pulled on her field gear methodically, each piece of equipment placed with purpose and precision that had become second nature during her years of military service. The assembly area buzzed with nervous energy as students gathered in the pale light of dawn. Williams appeared punctually, his presence immediately commanding attention without the need for shouted orders. Behind him stood 2 other instructors Emma hadn't seen before, both wearing the subdued insignia of Special Forces units. Their appearance suggested that the training was about to become significantly more demanding. "Gentlemen and ladies," Williams began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled group. "Welcome to the portion of this course where we discover who among you possesses the temperament for actual sniper operations." He gestured toward the mountains rising behind him. "For the next 5 days, you will be living in the field, conducting surveillance missions, and demonstrating your ability to remain undetected while gathering intelligence on simulated enemy positions." Emma felt her pulse quicken slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was the type of training she had been looking forward to, the practical application of skills that went beyond simple marksmanship. The ability to move unseen through hostile territory was perhaps the most crucial skill a sniper could possess, more important even than exceptional shooting ability. Williams continued his briefing with characteristic bluntness. "You will be working in teams of 2, with one member designated as the sniper and the other as the spotter. These roles will rotate during different phases of the exercise." His gaze swept across the assembled students. "Your success will depend entirely on your ability to work as a cohesive unit, while maintaining the stealth and patience that define effective sniper teams." The team assignments were posted on a board beside the instructor platform, and Emma scanned quickly to find her name. She had been paired with Henderson, a quiet soldier from Montana whose steady demeanor and careful attention to detail had impressed her during the previous week's training. It was a partnership that offered both advantages and challenges, as Henderson's methodical approach complemented her more intuitive style of problem-solving. Henderson approached as the group began organizing their equipment for the field exercise. "Looks like we're stuck with each other for the next 5 days," he said with a slight smile that took any sting out of the words. Emma nodded approvingly. "Could be worse," she replied. "At least you don't feel compelled to talk constantly." Henderson laughed quietly. "My wife says the same thing. Apparently, it's either a virtue or a character flaw, depending on your perspective." The first phase of the exercise required each team to establish an observation post overlooking a valley, where instructors would be conducting simulated enemy activities. The teams would need to move into position undetected, maintain surveillance for 24 hours, and then extract without being discovered by roving patrols that would be actively hunting for them. Emma and Henderson spent an hour studying topographical maps and planning their approach route. The valley was approximately 2 kilometers from their starting position, with terrain that offered both opportunities and obstacles for concealed movement. A series of ridgelines provided potential cover, but the final approach to any effective observation position would require crossing open ground that left them vulnerable to detection. The key is patience, Henderson observed as they traced possible routes on the map. Most teams will try to move too quickly and compromise their concealment. Emma agreed, remembering lessons learned during countless hunting expeditions where haste had resulted in spooked game and empty-handed returns to camp. We take our time getting there, even if it means arriving after some of the other teams. They departed their staging area at 1,200 hours, moving deliberately through pine forests that provided excellent concealment, but required careful navigation to maintain their intended heading. Emma took point initially, her familiarity with natural terrain proving valuable as she selected routes that minimized their exposure while maintaining reasonable progress toward their objective. Henderson proved to be an ideal partner for this type of movement. He followed precisely in Emma's footsteps, maintaining appropriate spacing and constantly scanning their flanks for potential threats. His military bearing suggested extensive field experience, though he had shared little about his background during their previous interactions. The afternoon progressed without incident as they worked their way steadily toward the observation area. Emma found herself settling into a rhythm that felt familiar from her civilian hunting experiences, reading the terrain intuitively and adjusting their route based on wind direction, natural cover, and the subtle signs that indicated how wildlife moved through the area. As they approached the final ridgeline before the valley, Emma called a halt to study their next move. Through binoculars, she could observe other teams already establishing positions along the high ground, some with excellent concealment, and others positioned in locations that would be easily spotted by any competent counter-surveillance effort. "Poor site selection," Henderson whispered, indicating a team that had positioned themselves on the obvious military crest of a hill. "They'll be silhouetted against the skyline from multiple angles." Emma nodded in agreement. "Williams is probably watching them right now, making notes about their tactical awareness." She continued scanning the valley floor, identifying the areas where instructors would likely position their simulated enemy activities. A cluster of buildings in the valley's center provided obvious targets for surveillance, but Emma suspected the real test would involve more subtle indicators of enemy presence scattered throughout the area. Henderson tapped her shoulder gently and pointed toward a fold in the terrain about 300 meters to their left. "Natural depression with good sight lines," he murmured. "Covered approach from this direction, multiple escape routes if we're compromised." Emma studied the position through her binoculars, appreciating his tactical eye. The location would require a longer movement to reach, but it offered superior concealment and fields of observation. They spent another hour working their way toward Henderson's suggested position, moving with exaggerated care as they approached what would be their home for the next 24 hours. The natural depression proved to be even better than it had appeared from a distance, providing a sheltered area where they could establish their observation post while remaining virtually invisible from any direction. Emma and Henderson worked together to prepare their position, arranging natural camouflage and establishing fields of fire that would allow them to observe the valley while maintaining concealment. The process required nearly 2 hours of meticulous work, but the result was a position that would be nearly impossible to detect, even by experienced counter-surveillance teams. As darkness approached, they settled into the routine that would define the next 24 hours. Emma took the first observation shift while Henderson prepared their equipment and established communications protocols with the base camp. The radio check-ins were brief and coded, designed to minimize the electronic signature that might reveal their position to monitoring equipment. Through her spotting scope, Emma began cataloging the activities visible in the valley below. Instructors moved through the area in patterns designed to simulate enemy operations, and her job was to identify and record these activities with sufficient detail to demonstrate effective surveillance capabilities. The work required intense concentration and patience, qualities that Emma had developed during years of hunting but had never applied in a military context. She found herself drawing on lessons learned during long hours in deer stands, maintaining alertness while remaining perfectly still for extended periods. Henderson relieved her at midnight, allowing Emma to rest while maintaining the continuous surveillance that the exercise required. She dozed fitfully in their concealed position, her sleep interrupted by the need to remain alert for potential discovery by the roving patrols that Williams had deployed to test their concealment. Dawn brought renewed activity in the valley, and Emma resumed observation duties as Henderson caught a few hours of rest. Through her scope, she observed other sniper teams being discovered and eliminated from the exercise, their positions revealed by poor camouflage, discipline, or movement at inappropriate times. The pattern of discoveries reinforced lessons Emma had internalized during her civilian hunting experience. Game animals possessed senses far more acute than human pursuers, and successful hunters learned to remain motionless for hours while maintaining perfect awareness of their surroundings. The skills translated directly to military applications, though the stakes were considerably higher. By the second evening of the exercise, only 12 teams remained undetected out of the original 13 that had begun the surveillance phase. Emma and Henderson had successfully avoided discovery while gathering comprehensive intelligence on the simulated enemy activities below. Their position remained secure, their observations detailed and accurate. Williams' voice crackled through their radio headset as the extraction phase began. All remaining teams, prepare for movement to extraction points. You have 4 hours to reach designated rally points without detection. Emma checked her map, identifying the extraction location that lay nearly 3 kilometers from their current position through terrain that would be actively patrolled by hunter teams. The extraction movement proved more challenging than their initial infiltration. Daylight movement required even greater care, and the knowledge that hunter teams were actively seeking them added psychological pressure that tested their patience and discipline. Emma and Henderson moved with exaggerated stealth, covering ground that might normally require an hour in nearly 4 hours of careful movement. They reached their extraction point with 20 minutes to spare, settling into concealment to wait for the designated pickup time. Around them, the sounds of other teams moving through the forest suggested that several groups were cutting their timing dangerously close to the deadline. Williams appeared at the extraction point precisely on schedule, his presence announced by subtle sounds that would have been missed by less alert observers. "Henderson, Johnson," he called quietly, "move to the rally point." They emerged from concealment and made their way to where other successful teams were gathering. Only 8 teams had successfully completed the entire exercise without detection. Emma felt a surge of satisfaction at their success, tempered by awareness that this was still relatively early in the course. The challenges would become progressively more demanding as Williams and his instructors worked to identify students who possessed the complete skill set required for sniper operations. The debriefing that followed was characteristically thorough, with Williams analyzing each team's performance in detail. He praised those who had demonstrated superior fieldcraft while offering pointed criticism to teams whose mistakes had led to their discovery. Emma and Henderson received acknowledgement for their successful completion of the exercise, though Williams offered no particular praise for their performance. Back in the barracks that evening, Emma reflected on lessons learned during the field exercise. The surveillance and movement phases had felt familiar in many ways, drawing on skills developed during years of hunting and outdoor activities. But the military application of those skills required a level of precision and patience that exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Patterson had been eliminated during the second day of the exercise, her team discovered by a roving patrol after making the mistake of moving during daylight hours. She accepted the failure with characteristic grace, acknowledging that her competitive shooting background hadn't prepared her for the fieldcraft requirements of sniper operations. "Different skill set entirely," she admitted as she packed her equipment for transfer back to her previous unit. "I can shoot with the best of them, but this sneaking around in the woods isn't something you learn on shooting ranges." Emma felt genuine regret at losing Patterson as a training partner, recognizing that her analytical approach to marksmanship had been valuable during their practice sessions. The elimination of Patterson and other skilled students reinforced Emma's understanding that sniper training required a combination of abilities that few individuals possessed in sufficient measure. Excellent marksmanship was merely the foundation upon which other skills had to be built, and failure in any single area could result in elimination from the program. Henderson proved to be an excellent source of information about the advanced phases of training that lay ahead. He had attempted sniper school once before, making it to week 8 before being eliminated during a challenging shooting test. His experience provided valuable insight into the expectations and standards that would define the remainder of the course. "The shooting gets progressively more difficult," he explained during one of their evening conversations. "Not just longer ranges, but more complex scenarios that test your ability to make precision shots under pressure." Emma appreciated the information, though she felt confident in her fundamental marksmanship abilities. What concerned her more were the psychological aspects of sniper training that Henderson described. The ability to make life-and-death decisions while operating independently, the mental discipline required to remain focused during extended missions, the emotional resilience needed to carry out orders that might conflict with personal moral preferences. These were areas where her civilian hunting experience provided limited preparation. Taking game animals for food was fundamentally different from the human targeting that defined military sniper operations, both in terms of technical requirements and psychological demands. Williams seemed to sense her concerns during a brief individual counseling session that marked the end of Week 3. "Johnson," he said, studying her performance records, "your fieldcraft and marksmanship are developing well. The question that remains is whether you have the mental toughness for the targeting decisions that snipers face in combat." Emma understood what he was asking, though she wasn't certain how to answer. The truth was that she had never been required to make the type of life-and-death decisions that combat snipers faced regularly. Her military service had included combat deployments, but never in roles that required her to deliberately take human life from positions of concealment and advantage. "I understand the question, Sergeant Major," she replied carefully. "I won't know the answer until I'm tested." Williams nodded approvingly. "Honest response," he said. "Better than claiming capabilities you haven't demonstrated." He made a note in her file. "We'll find out soon enough. The scenarios get more realistic from here." Week 4 brought the introduction of advanced shooting techniques that pushed the limits of both equipment and human capability. The ranges extended beyond anything Emma had previously attempted, with targets positioned at distances that required precise calculations of environmental factors and ballistic variables. The morning briefing outlined shooting requirements that seemed almost impossible: 800-meter shots in crosswinds, 1,000-meter engagements against moving targets, precision shooting from unconventional positions that tested both physical stability and mental concentration. Emma felt her confidence waver slightly as Williams described scenarios that would challenge even experienced snipers. Henderson provided reassurance during their equipment preparation. "Remember that everyone else is facing the same challenges," he said quietly. "The standards are high because they need to be, but Williams isn't trying to make the course impossible to pass." Emma appreciated the perspective, though she remained somewhat intimidated by the technical demands of the advanced shooting phases. The first long-range shooting session took place on a range that stretched across a valley between two ridgelines. Targets were positioned at measured distances from 600 to 1,200 meters, with environmental conditions that changed throughout the day as wind patterns shifted and temperature variations affected bullet flight characteristics. Emma approached her first 800-meter shot with careful preparation, spending several minutes studying wind indicators and calculating the adjustments needed to compensate for the extended range. The target appeared impossibly small through her rifle scope, requiring precise hold-off calculations that left little margin for error. Her first shot impacted low and left of the target center, a miss that indicated errors in either her environmental reading or ballistic calculations. She made adjustments based on the observed impact and fired again, this time achieving a hit within the acceptable scoring zone. The success felt disproportionately satisfying given the technical difficulty of the shot. Henderson achieved similar results during his shooting sequence, demonstrating the steady competence that had characterized his performance throughout the course. Together they worked through the progressively more difficult shooting challenges, supporting each other with wind reading and target observation that enhanced their individual capabilities. The day's shooting concluded with qualification attempts at the maximum range of 1,200 meters. At this distance, the targets were barely visible, even through high-powered telescopic sights, requiring shooting techniques that pushed the boundaries of both equipment and human ability. Emma's first attempt at the extreme range target resulted in a complete miss, her bullet impacting somewhere in the dirt backdrop without visible effect. She spent several minutes recalculating her hold-off estimates, accounting for the additional factors that became significant at such extended ranges. Her second shot achieved a hit, though outside the precise scoring zones that defined qualification standards. The impact was sufficient to demonstrate basic competence at extreme range shooting, but fell short of the precision that Williams demanded from students who aspired to graduate from his program. Only 4 students achieved qualifying scores at the 1,200-meter range during that day's shooting. Emma felt disappointment at her performance, tempered by awareness that she was still learning techniques that even experienced snipers found challenging. Henderson offered encouragement, pointing out that her progress had been steady and that improvement would come with additional practice. That evening brought technical instruction on the factors that affected bullet flight at extreme ranges. Williams proved to be exceptionally knowledgeable about ballistic science, walking students through mathematical calculations that accounted for atmospheric conditions, Earth rotation effects, and the minute variations in ammunition performance that became significant at long ranges. Emma found herself fascinated by the technical complexity of precision shooting, recognizing parallels to engineering disciplines she had studied briefly before joining the military. The mathematical precision required to consistently hit targets at extreme ranges appealed to her analytical nature, though she understood that intellectual knowledge would need to be paired with practical experience to achieve reliable results. The instruction continued late into the evening, with Williams demonstrating calculation techniques and environmental reading methods that separated competent marksmen from truly exceptional precision shooters. Emma took detailed notes, recognizing that her success in the remaining weeks would depend heavily on mastering these technical skills. Henderson shared additional insights based on his previous experience with the course, explaining how Williams' teaching methods built systematically toward the final shooting tests that would determine graduation. "He's not trying to teach you everything at once," Henderson explained. "Each phase builds on the previous one, adding complexity gradually so you develop confidence along with skill." Emma appreciated the systematic approach, though she remained aware that time was becoming a factor in her development. Students who failed to meet standards at any point could be eliminated or recycled to repeat portions of the training, and she was determined to maintain the progression necessary to graduate with her current class. Week 5 brought the integration of shooting skills with advanced fieldcraft in scenarios that simulated realistic combat missions. Students were required to move undetected to predetermined positions, establish shooting sites, and engage targets at varying ranges while maintaining concealment from simulated enemy forces. The scenarios tested every skill developed during the previous weeks, requiring seamless integration of movement techniques, camouflage discipline, environmental reading, and precision shooting under time pressure. Emma found these exercises particularly challenging, as they demanded rapid transitions between different skill sets while maintaining the patience and precision that defined effective sniper operations. Her first integrated exercise involved a movement of nearly 2 kilometers followed by precision shooting at ranges exceeding 800 meters. The combination of physical exertion and mental concentration required careful pacing to ensure that her shooting performance wasn't compromised by fatigue from the approach movement. Henderson served as her spotter for the exercise, providing wind reading and target observation support that enhanced her shooting capabilities. Their partnership had developed into an effective team relationship, with communication patterns and role distributions that maximized their combined effectiveness. Emma's shooting during the integrated exercise met qualification standards, though her performance was less consistent than during static range sessions. The additional stress factors inherent in field exercises clearly affected her precision, suggesting areas where additional practice would be beneficial. Williams observed their performance closely, making notes that would influence their overall course evaluation. "Adequate performance under field conditions," he commented after their completion of the exercise. "Room for improvement in stress management and target engagement speed." Emma accepted the feedback as constructive criticism rather than personal attack, recognizing that Williams' standards were demanding but fair. The week concluded with individual counseling sessions where Williams provided detailed feedback on each student's progress and areas requiring improvement. Emma's session revealed both strengths and weaknesses in her developing skill set, with particular emphasis on the need for continued improvement in extreme range shooting and target engagement under time pressure. "You have the fundamental capabilities to succeed in this program," Williams told her during the counseling session. "The question is whether you can develop the consistency and confidence needed for graduation standards." Emma understood that this represented significant progress from his initial assessment of her capabilities, though she remained aware that substantial challenges lay ahead. Henderson's counseling session was apparently more positive, as his previous experience with the course material allowed him to demonstrate competencies that newer students were still developing. Emma felt no resentment about their different progress rates, recognizing that Henderson's background provided advantages that she would need to overcome through dedicated practice and study. As the 5th week ended, Emma reflected on her progress through the most challenging training she had ever attempted. Her marksmanship skills had improved significantly, her fieldcraft abilities were developing well, and her understanding of sniper tactics and techniques had expanded considerably. Yet she remained aware that the most difficult portions of the course lay ahead, with graduation standards that would test every aspect of her training and natural abilities. The emergency klaxon shattered the early morning stillness at Fort Carson, its urgent wail cutting through the mountain air like a blade. Emma jolted awake in her barracks bunk, instantly alert despite having been asleep for less than 4 hours. Around her, the remaining 18 students of sniper school scrambled into gear with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had learned that hesitation could mean failure. Within minutes, they were assembled in the briefing room where Williams stood beside a projection screen displaying satellite imagery of rugged terrain. His expression was grimmer than usual, and Emma felt a knot of tension form in her stomach as she recognized the signs of an unscheduled exercise. These impromptu scenarios were always the most challenging, designed to test students under conditions that most closely simulated actual combat operations. At 0347 hours this morning, Williams began without preamble. A military convoy was ambushed 15 kilometers northeast of this position. The attack was coordinated and professional, suggesting enemy forces with advanced training and equipment. He clicked to the next slide, showing aerial photographs of twisted metal and scattered debris. 3 vehicles destroyed, 7 personnel confirmed killed, 4 missing and presumed captured. Emma studied the images, noting the precision of the attack and the strategic positioning that had allowed the ambushers to achieve such devastating results. This wasn't random violence, but carefully planned military action, executed by professionals who understood modern warfare tactics. Williams continued his briefing with characteristic directness. Intelligence indicates the responsible unit is a cell of foreign operatives who have established a base camp somewhere in the wilderness area north of the highway. They're well-equipped, well-trained, and extremely dangerous. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the assembled students. Your mission is to locate this base camp, conduct detailed surveillance, and provide targeting data for elimination of the threat. The room fell silent as students absorbed the implications of what Williams was describing. This wasn't a training exercise with simulated targets and blank ammunition. This was a real-world mission with actual enemies who would shoot back if discovered. A deployment where mistakes could result in genuine casualties rather than mere academic failure. Henderson raised his hand tentatively. Sergeant Major, are we talking about live operations here? Williams nodded curtly. You are students in advanced sniper training, he replied. However, given the tactical situation and the proximity of this threat to a major military installation, you will be operating under the command of special operations personnel who will make all engagement decisions. Emma felt her pulse quicken as the reality of the situation became clear. After 7 weeks of training exercises and simulated scenarios, they were being thrust into actual combat operations where their developing skills would be tested under conditions that offered no second chances for failure. The mission briefing continued with detailed intelligence updates and tactical assignments. Students would be divided into 6 teams of 3 members each, with experienced Special Forces soldiers attached to provide command and control. Emma found herself assigned to Team Charlie alongside Henderson and a newer student named Morrison, a former Marine whose steady demeanor had impressed the instructors during recent field exercises. Their team's area of operations covered a section of mountainous terrain that offered excellent concealment but required difficult movement through steep, rocky ground. According to intelligence reports, this sector contained several locations that could potentially serve as base camps for the type of professional military unit they were hunting. Sergeant First Class David Torres would serve as their team leader, a Special Forces sniper with extensive combat experience in Afghanistan and Iraq. Emma recognized his reputation from conversations with other students, as Torres was known throughout the Special Operations community as one of the most skilled precision marksmen in the Army. Torres conducted their team briefing with professional efficiency, outlining movement routes, communication protocols, and engagement criteria that would govern their actions in the field. Your job, he explained, is to use your training to locate and identify the enemy position. My job is to make the tactical decisions about what happens next. Emma appreciated the clear delineation of responsibilities, recognizing that Torres's experience provided the tactical judgment that student snipers still lacked. At the same time, she understood that their developing skills would be crucial to mission success, as trained sniper teams possessed observation and movement capabilities that conventional forces couldn't match. Equipment preparation took place with unusual urgency, as teams would deploy within 2 hours of the initial briefing. Emma checked and rechecked her rifle, ensuring that every component was properly configured for the extended range shooting that might be required. Her M24 weapon system had been zeroed meticulously during previous training, and she felt confident in its mechanical reliability. Henderson worked methodically through his spotting equipment, calibrating range-finding devices and communication gear that would be essential for effective target identification and engagement. Morrison, despite being newer to the program, displayed the equipment familiarity that reflected his Marine Corps background and combat deployment experience. Torres observed their preparations with approval, noting the systematic approach and attention to detail that characterized competent sniper teams. "Good habits in training translate to survival in combat," he commented as they completed their equipment checks. "The enemy we're hunting is professional, so our response needs to be equally professional." The helicopter insertion took place under cover of darkness, with their team inserted at a landing zone approximately 4 kilometers from their assigned search area. The flight was Emma's first operational insertion, and she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the aircraft approached the mountainous terrain where they would be operating. Torres led them away from the landing zone with practiced stealth, setting a pace that balanced the need for rapid movement with the requirement for noise discipline. The terrain was even more challenging than the maps had suggested, with loose rock and steep gradients that demanded careful foot placement to avoid creating sounds that might betray their presence. Emma found herself drawing on lessons learned during countless hunting expeditions as she moved through the darkness, reading the ground texture through her boots, and adjusting her movement techniques to minimize noise. The skills that had allowed her to approach cautious deer were proving valuable for stalking human prey who possessed far more sophisticated detection capabilities. After 2 hours of movement, Torres called a halt in a concealed position that offered observation over a valley where intelligence suggested the enemy might have established their base. Through night vision equipment, Emma could see the terrain features that made this area attractive for a semi-permanent encampment, with water sources, natural cover, and multiple escape routes. Henderson established communication with the command post while Morrison and Torres conducted initial reconnaissance of their observation area. Emma studied the valley through her rifle scope, noting the natural lines of drift that would affect long-range shooting and identifying positions where enemy sentries might be posted. The night passed without significant contact, though Emma observed vehicle movement on distant roads that suggested ongoing activity in the general area. Torres made careful note of these observations, building a pattern analysis that would help determine whether they were tracking the correct enemy unit. Dawn brought clearer visibility and the opportunity for more detailed surveillance of the target area. Emma established a concealed shooting position while Henderson took over spotting duties and Morrison maintained watch for threats to their flanks. The routine felt familiar from training exercises, though the knowledge that hostile forces might be observing them in return added psychological pressure that hadn't existed during academic instruction. Through her telescopic sight, Emma began systematic observation of the valley floor, looking for the subtle signs that indicated human presence in wilderness areas. Disturbed vegetation, unnatural color patterns, geometric shapes that didn't belong in natural environments, all the indicators that Torres had taught them to recognize during their briefing. Henderson worked methodically with range-finding equipment, calculating precise distances to potential target areas, and recording the environmental factors that would affect bullet flight if engagement became necessary. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, all the variables that Emma had studied extensively during classroom instruction but was now applying under operational conditions. Morrison maintained security watch while simultaneously conducting counter-surveillance, ensuring that their own position remained undetected while they observed the enemy area. His Marine background proved valuable for this type of security work, as he possessed instincts for threat detection that came from previous combat experience. The first significant discovery came during the second day of surveillance, when Emma observed movement patterns that suggested a concealed vehicle position approximately 800 meters from their observation post. The signs were subtle, consisting mainly of tire tracks in areas where casual observation wouldn't reveal them, but they indicated recent activity by vehicles that were attempting to avoid detection. Torres studied Emma's observations through his own optics, confirming her assessment and adding details based on his extensive field experience. "Good eye," he commented quietly. Most students would have missed those indicators. Emma felt a surge of satisfaction at the recognition, though she remained focused on the developing tactical situation. Henderson's range calculations confirmed that the suspected vehicle position fell within effective engagement range for their weapon systems, though Torres emphasized that no shots would be fired without specific authorization from higher command. Their mission remained surveillance and target identification, with engagement decisions reserved for special operations leadership. The surveillance continued through the afternoon as they gathered additional intelligence about the suspected enemy position. Emma observed personnel movement that confirmed human presence in the area, though the individuals were too distant and too well concealed for detailed identification. The pattern of activity suggested a professional military unit that understood counter-surveillance techniques. Communication with the command post revealed that other teams were developing similar intelligence in adjacent areas, building a comprehensive picture of enemy dispositions that would support tactical decision-making. Emma felt pride at contributing to this intelligence picture, recognizing that her developing sniper skills were proving valuable for real-world military operations. As evening approached, Torres made the decision to establish a new observation position that would provide better visibility of the suspected enemy camp. The movement required careful planning and execution, as they would need to reposition without alerting the enemy to their presence while maintaining the ability to continue surveillance. Emma took point for the repositioning movement, using skills developed during training exercises to navigate through terrain that offered concealment while avoiding areas where they might be silhouetted or exposed to observation. The movement took nearly 3 hours to complete, but resulted in a position that provided significantly improved visibility of the target area. From their new location, Emma could observe the enemy position in much greater detail. What had appeared to be a simple vehicle park was actually a sophisticated base camp with concealed fighting positions, camouflage supply areas, and defensive obstacles that indicated extensive preparation and professional military engineering. Henderson worked with Torres to develop detailed range cards for the new position, calculating precise distances to key targets and recording the environmental factors that would affect engagement if shooting became necessary. The base camp was approximately 600 meters from their position, well within effective range for precision rifle fire. Morrison maintained security, while Emma and Henderson conducted detailed observation of the enemy position. Through her rifle scope, Emma could see personnel moving through the camp with tactical discipline that confirmed these were professional soldiers rather than irregular insurgents or criminal groups. The enemy's level of preparation was impressive and concerning. Their camp was positioned to take advantage of natural terrain features that provided concealment from aerial observation, while offering multiple escape routes if their position was compromised. Their security procedures appeared thorough, with sentries posted at key positions and regular patrols that would detect casual intrusion attempts. Torres transmitted their intelligence to the command post using encrypted communication equipment that prevented enemy interception. The detailed targeting data they had developed would be crucial for planning the elimination of this threat, whether through direct action by special operations forces or precision strikes by other military assets. As the third day of surveillance began, Emma noticed changes in the enemy's activity patterns that suggested possible preparation for movement. Vehicle maintenance activities increased, equipment was being consolidated, and personnel movement patterns suggested preparation for departure from their current location. Henderson confirmed Emma's observations through his spotting scope, noting additional indicators that the enemy unit might be preparing to relocate. This development added urgency to their mission, as the intelligence they were gathering might become obsolete if the enemy moved before action could be taken. Torres made the critical decision to request immediate engagement authorization, recognizing that the opportunity to eliminate this threat might disappear if the enemy succeeded in relocating to a new position. His communication with the command post was brief and professional, conveying the tactical situation and his assessment of the time-sensitive nature of the target. The response came within an hour, authorizing immediate engagement of the enemy position by sniper teams already in position. Emma felt her heart rate increase as she realized that her training was about to be tested under the ultimate conditions, with live targets who would shoot back if they detected her presence. Torres conducted a final briefing on engagement procedures, assigning specific targets to each team member and establishing communication protocols that would coordinate their actions. Emma would be responsible for neutralizing the sentry position that posed the greatest threat to their own security, while Henderson provided spotting support and Morrison maintained flank security. The preparation for engagement required meticulous attention to every detail that could affect shot placement at 600 meters. Emma checked her rifle 01 final time, confirmed her ammunition selection, and calculated the environmental factors that would influence bullet flight during the engagement. Henderson worked with laser range-finding equipment to confirm exact distances to each target, providing Emma with precise data that eliminated guesswork from her shooting calculations. The range to her assigned target was 587 meters, requiring specific adjustments for the environmental conditions that existed at the time of engagement. Torres coordinated the engagement timing with other sniper teams through encrypted radio communication, ensuring that simultaneous shots would prevent the enemy from responding effectively to the attack. The coordination was crucial, as a poorly timed engagement could result in a running firefight that might compromise the mission and endanger the sniper teams. Emma settled into her final shooting position with practiced calm, controlling her breathing and heart rate as she had been taught during months of training. The target appeared clearly through her telescopic sight, a professional soldier who was unfortunately on the wrong side of this particular conflict. The engagement command came as a quiet word from Torres, transmitted simultaneously to all sniper teams in position around the enemy camp. Emma's shot broke cleanly, the rifle recoiling in a familiar pattern as the bullet flew downrange toward its target. Through her scope, she observed the immediate effect of her shot, confirming target neutralization as Henderson had trained her to do. Around the enemy position, other shots impacted with similar precision as the coordinated sniper engagement eliminated key targets simultaneously. The professional planning and execution of the attack left the enemy no opportunity for organized response, neutralizing the threat with minimal risk to friendly forces. The aftermath of the engagement proceeded with tactical efficiency that reflected extensive training and preparation. Torres coordinated extraction procedures while Emma and Henderson documented the results of their shooting for subsequent after-action analysis. Morrison maintained security watch to ensure that no surviving enemy personnel posed a threat during their departure. The helicopter extraction took place 2 hours after the engagement, lifting the sniper teams out of the area before enemy reinforcements could arrive or organize pursuit operations. Emma felt a complex mixture of emotions as the aircraft climbed away from the mountains, recognizing that she had successfully completed her first operational shooting under combat conditions. Back at Fort Carson, the after-action debriefing revealed the complete success of the mission and the critical role that student sniper teams had played in eliminating a significant threat to military and civilian personnel. Williams conducted the debriefing with characteristic thoroughness, analyzing each team's performance and extracting lessons that would benefit future training. Emma's shooting performance received particular attention during the analysis, as her 600-meter engagement had demonstrated the precision and composure that defined effective sniper operations. Torres provided additional commentary based on his observation of her performance under operational stress. Johnson demonstrated exceptional competence during real-world operations, Torres reported to Williams and the assembled students. Her technical skills, tactical awareness, and psychological stability under pressure indicate strong potential for advanced sniper operations. Emma felt pride at this recognition from an experienced special operations professional. The operational deployment had provided validation that her training was developing genuine military capabilities rather than merely academic knowledge. The successful engagement had required integration of every skill developed during the previous weeks, from precise marksmanship to tactical movement to stress management under life-threatening conditions. Henderson's performance as a spotter had been equally professional, providing the support and coordination that enabled Emma's successful shot. Their partnership had functioned effectively under operational conditions, demonstrating the team chemistry that Williams emphasized as crucial for sniper operations. The mission success also validated Williams' training methods and the standards he maintained for student performance. The operational deployment had essentially served as a final examination that tested every aspect of sniper training under the most demanding conditions possible. As the debriefing concluded, Emma reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed since the first day of sniper school. Williams' initial assessment of her as an unqualified candidate had been replaced by recognition of genuine operational capability demonstrated under combat conditions. The transformation hadn't been dramatic or sudden, but rather the gradual development of skills and confidence that came from systematic training and increasing challenges. Each phase of the course had built upon previous learning, developing capabilities that Emma hadn't known she possessed when she first arrived at Fort Carson. Yet she also understood that graduation from sniper school would mark a beginning rather than an ending. The operational mission had provided a glimpse of the responsibilities and challenges that would define her career as a precision marksman, including the psychological demands of making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Williams approached her after the formal debriefing concluded, his expression carrying none of the hostility that had characterized their early interactions. "Johnson," he said simply, "you've exceeded my initial expectations." Emma nodded in acknowledgement, recognizing this as perhaps the highest praise Williams was capable of offering. "The question now," he continued, "is whether you're prepared for the responsibilities that come with these capabilities." Emma understood what he was asking, recognizing that technical proficiency was only one component of effective sniper operations. "I believe I am, Sergeant Major," she replied carefully, "but I also understand that belief and reality are different things." Williams nodded approvingly. "Accurate assessment," he said. "We'll find out for certain during the final phases of training." 6 months after graduation, Emma knelt motionless in the Afghan mountains, her rifle trained on a valley 1,500 meters below. The target was a Taliban commander whose convoy would pass through the kill zone in less than 10 minutes. Through her scope, she watched vehicles approach the predetermined engagement point, their occupants unaware that death waited in the thin mountain air above them. Her spotter, Corporal Jenkins, whispered range and wind corrections that confirmed her own calculations. The shot would push every boundary of human and equipment capability, requiring precision that existed at the absolute edge of what was technically possible. At this distance, the target would never hear the sound that killed him. Williams had been wrong about one thing during that first brutal briefing. Emma wasn't taking up space meant for someone else. She had become exactly what the Army needed, a precision instrument capable of eliminating threats that conventional forces couldn't touch. The convoy reached the engagement point. Through her scope, Emma could see the target clearly, a man in his 50s, whose decisions had resulted in dozens of American casualties over the past year. Intelligence indicated he was planning a major offensive that would cost many more lives if he wasn't stopped. Jenkins provided final confirmation of environmental factors. Wind speed 2 miles per hour from the left. Temperature 78 degrees. Humidity 45%. Emma made minute adjustments to her point of aim, accounting for variables that would deflect her bullet across the enormous distance to target. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that had become second nature during months of training and operational deployments. Heart rate steady, muscles relaxed except for the precise tension needed to control the rifle. The crosshairs settled on their target as Emma prepared to make the longest confirmed kill shot of her military career. The trigger broke cleanly under her fingers' pressure. The rifle recoiled in its familiar pattern as the bullet began its journey across nearly a mile of mountain air. Through her scope, Emma tracked the projectile's flight time, counting seconds until impact and the deliberate cadence Williams had drilled into every student. The target dropped instantly, struck by a bullet that had traveled 1,500 meters with surgical precision. Around him, other convoy members reacted with confusion and panic, searching for threats they couldn't locate or comprehend. Emma was already preparing to engage secondary targets when Jenkins called the mission complete. They extracted from their shooting position with practiced efficiency, moving through terrain that would conceal their withdrawal from any pursuit attempts. The mission had achieved its objectives with textbook precision, eliminating a high-value target while maintaining operational security that protected other ongoing operations. Back at the forward operating base, Emma cleaned her rifle with the same methodical care she had learned during those first weeks at Fort Carson. The weapon had performed flawlessly during the engagement, delivering the precision she had demanded under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The after-action report would document another successful mission for the sniper team that had become legendary throughout their area of operations. Emma's shooting record now included 12 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, establishing her as one of the most effective precision marksmen in the theater. Yet as she completed her equipment maintenance, Emma found herself thinking not about the statistics or recognition, but about the quiet satisfaction that came from mastering skills that few people ever developed. The journey from that first humiliating briefing to operational excellence had required everything she possessed, but the results validated every hour of training and every moment of doubt. Williams' final assessment had proven prophetic in unexpected ways. Emma had indeed discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, but more importantly, she had learned to trust those capabilities under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The farm girl who once hunted rabbits with her father's rifle had become a weapon system capable of changing the outcome of entire military operations. 3 years later, Emma found herself back at Fort Carson as an instructor in the same sniper school where her military transformation had begun. Williams had retired the previous year, and Emma now occupied his position as senior instructor, responsible for training the next generation of precision marksmen. Her first class included 15 students, 3 of whom were women facing the same skepticism and challenges Emma had encountered years earlier. She studied their personnel files with interest, noting the diverse backgrounds and motivations that had brought them to sniper training. The morning briefing proceeded with professional efficiency, as Emma outlined course requirements and standards for the new students. Her approach was demanding but fair, emphasizing the technical and psychological challenges they would face while avoiding the personal attacks that had characterized her own introduction to the program. "This course has high standards because the mission requires them," she explained to the assembled students. "Your success will depend on your ability to master skills that save lives and complete missions other forces cannot accomplish." Her tone carried authority earned through operational experience, rather than institutional intimidation. One of the female students, a young soldier named Martinez from Texas, reminded Emma strongly of herself during those first uncertain weeks. She possessed evident shooting talent but lacked confidence in her ability to meet the course's broader requirements. Emma made a mental note to provide additional mentoring that might help Martinez develop her full potential. The training progression followed established patterns, building systematically from basic marksmanship through advanced fieldcraft to complex operational scenarios. Emma observed each student's development carefully, identifying strengths to build upon and weaknesses that required additional attention. Martinez struggled initially with the physical demands of extended field operations, her small frame working against her during movements that required carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. Emma provided extra instruction in movement techniques and equipment configuration that minimized these disadvantages. During private counseling sessions, Emma shared insights based on her own experience overcoming similar challenges. "Physical limitations can be compensated through superior technique and preparation," she explained to Martinez. "The key is developing skills that allow you to be more effective than stronger students who rely purely on physical capability." The approach proved successful as Martinez began demonstrating competence that exceeded her apparent physical limitations. Her shooting remained consistently excellent, while her fieldcraft improved dramatically through focused training and increased confidence in her abilities. Emma found genuine satisfaction in watching Martinez and other students develop capabilities they hadn't known they possessed. The teaching role provided different rewards than operational deployments, focusing on developing human potential rather than eliminating threats through precise application of lethal force. The final shooting test took place on the same range where Emma had once struggled to achieve qualification standards. Martinez approached the 1,500-meter target with careful preparation, her movements reflecting months of training and the confidence that came from systematic skill development. Emma observed through spotting optics as Martinez settled into her shooting position, her technique demonstrating the fundamentals Emma had emphasized throughout the course. Wind reading, range estimation, environmental analysis, all the technical skills required for extreme range precision shooting. Martinez's shot broke cleanly, the bullet flying across the enormous distance to impact within the qualification zone. Emma felt pride that matched what she had experienced during her own operational successes, recognizing that Martinez had achieved something that many experienced soldiers never accomplished. The graduation ceremony took place with military formality that recognized the significance of completing one of the Army's most demanding courses. Emma addressed the graduating class with remarks that emphasized both their achievement and the responsibilities that accompanied their new capabilities. "You have developed skills that few people possess," she told the assembled graduates. "Your success in this program represents the beginning of your development as precision marksmen, not the completion of your learning." The words carried weight earned through years of operational experience and proven competence. Martinez approached after the ceremony concluded, her expression reflecting both pride and uncertainty about the challenges ahead. "Ma'am," she said hesitantly, "I wanted to thank you for believing I could succeed when I wasn't certain myself." Emma smiled, remembering similar conversations from her own training experience. "Belief without capability is useless," Emma replied. But you developed the capability through your own efforts. I just provided guidance and encouragement when you needed them." She paused, studying Martinez's determined expression. "The real test comes during operational deployments when you apply these skills under combat conditions." Martinez nodded seriously, understanding that graduation marked a transition rather than a destination. "I hope I can perform as well as you have, ma'am," she said. Emma appreciated the sentiment while recognizing that each sniper would face unique challenges that required individual solutions. "You'll perform according to your preparation and character," Emma said simply. "Both appear to be excellent." It was perhaps the highest praise she could offer, representing an assessment based on months of observation and professional judgment. As the graduation ceremony concluded and students departed for their new assignments, Emma reflected on the circular nature of her journey from student to instructor. The skills Williams had forced her to develop under adversity were now being passed to new students who would face their own challenges and discoveries. The transformation from doubtful recruit to accomplished instructor represented more than personal achievement. It demonstrated the military's capacity to identify and develop human potential that might otherwise remain undiscovered, creating capabilities that served both individual fulfillment and national security requirements. Emma's office in the Sniper School building contained mementos from her operational deployments alongside instructional materials for current courses. The combination represented different phases of her career, from the application of lethal skills under combat conditions to the development of those same skills in new students. A framed photograph on her desk showed her grandfather with the hunting rifle that had started her journey toward precision marksmanship. His patient instruction during childhood hunting expeditions had provided foundations that proved crucial during military training, though neither of them could have anticipated such applications at the time. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mountains as Emma prepared for another day of instruction with her current class. Tomorrow would bring new challenges for students who were discovering their own capabilities under demanding conditions, continuing the cycle of development that produced America's precision marksmen. Her phone displayed a text message from Martinez, now deployed to Afghanistan and serving as a sniper with the 82nd Airborne Division. "First operational kill at 1,200 meters, the message read. "Thank you for the training that made it possible." Emma smiled, feeling the satisfaction that came from successful mentorship and proven instruction. The journey from that first humiliating briefing to her current position had required everything she possessed, but the results justified every challenge and setback. Emma had not only proved Williams wrong about her potential, but had exceeded even her own expectations of what she might accomplish through determination and systematic skill development. As darkness settled over Fort Carson, Emma completed her preparation for tomorrow's instruction with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her approach to precision shooting. Excellence, she had learned, was not an accident but the result of deliberate preparation and unwavering commitment to standards that most people never attempted to achieve. The simple woman from Nebraska who had been told she would never make sniper had become something far more significant. She had become a teacher of skills that protected American lives and completed missions that conventional forces could not accomplish. In the end, that transformation represented the finest achievement of her military career. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.